Here we go again. The flu season is upon us.
It happens every time. It's just amazing how the CDC and the hospitalists and the doctors forget about the data from 2009. So here we go again.
Say, yeah, and the news is reporting that people are dying from the flu and they're being urged or frightened into getting the flu shots again.
Right.
So is this truth or hype, and are the statistics overstated, and who exactly is dying? Well, it sounds like we need to take another look at this topic because the facts are ignored for the most part or forgotten. So do you need a reminder as to why the flu vaccine is not the answer?
I find it stunning, Vicki, that the same thing that we have been looking at for year after year, finding that the flu vaccine doesn't have any data to support that it works. There are probably 200-300 articles that have been written on this. And Dr. Tom Jefferson, who's in charge of the Cochrane group that looks at things like this and immunizations, has just blatantly said that 95% of the data that's out there that's published about the flu vaccine is garbage, and the other 5% doesn't show that the vaccine works.
It doesn't affect the death rates at all.
It doesn't affect the death rates. It doesn't affect the hospital rates. It doesn't even change the number of visits relative to other illnesses that people go to see their doctor.
And yet they say that the placebo-controlled trials are unethical because the flu saves lives. So they just kind of like throw this out like it's data, and it's not.
It's a proclamation. So what has happened is somebody has proclaimed the flu vaccine works, and it's the CDC that's doing it. And I have to tell you, the reputation of the CDC amongst people who have studied what they do is just terrible. The conflicts of interest never stop. And it's from the top of the CDC down. Remember, Vicki, back in 2009 when Judy Gerberding, the doctor who was in charge of the CDC, was looking at all this data?
She ended up working for Merck.
Yeah, she got a nice job working for Merck. And of course, she's in charge of their vaccine department. And if she's making what other people in that position make with other drug companies, she's making millions of dollars every year as payment.
Well, also the FDA uses its emergency authorization powers in order to approve vaccines that are not tested for safety.
Yeah, well, it even says on the statement that it's in the package insert that looks at, is the flu vaccine safe? And they can't say that it is. And yet the people who are in charge at the CDC level and the FDA level are saying, oh, we know that it's safe. Don't worry, just trust us. Well, then why does the insert say what it says?
Well, then also tell us about how Congress gave legal immunity to the vaccine manufacturers.
Well, you can sure paint a picture for a conspiracy here, because there is a law now that protects vaccine makers from being sued for any side effects that occur that are serious from the vaccine. And the government picks up the tab. And then what's worse yet is the government guarantees payment for the flu shot. They did in 2009.
Plus they advanced payment and gave the vaccine manufacturers in 2009 $7 billion to get the flu vaccines here.
Right. So there was no way they could go wrong. And in addition, they didn't have to worry about the side effects and complications. So what incentive did they have to try and find out that the vaccine had side effects? None, because if they knew, they would sell less of it.
And there's no incentive to get the thimerosal or the mercury out of it either.
That's hard to believe.
Or the other adjuvants.
Well, the mercury, especially for a child, is a huge dose of mercury. And for an adult, for seniors, there was some work done by Dr. Hugh Fudenberg, who probably published in excess of 300 articles, a world-renowned immunologist, stated that if over 10 years, adults over the age of 65 got 4 vaccines, 4 with thimerosal, like the flu shot, that the risk of Alzheimer's disease goes up. So we've got some data here that's frightening, and people making proclamations that are also equally scary.
Well, you know what else is really scary is when they say that pregnant women and children should get the vaccines because there's an epidemic or a pandemic or people are getting the flu, and so that makes it okay for them to have it with these adjuvants that might not be so healthy because it's worth it.
Well, here's what happened with that, Vicki. First of all, the American Society for OB/GYN doctors made a statement and said there's no evidence to show that the flu shot is dangerous for women who are pregnant or their babies. But there's no data. So they're again making a proclamation, say, well, it must be safe because we're not seeing that much in the way of problems. But again, here the package insert says what? It says it's not shown to be safe for mothers or their babies. And yet we've got proclamations by Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was the governor in 2009, making a change in the law that allowed mercury to be given to babies and to pregnant women, even with the mercury in it. And the same thing happened in New York. And that eventually led to a lawsuit by Jim Turner, a lawyer who is looking to protect the rights of the public. And they overturned it and stopped them from being able to force people to take vaccines.
We need to not be like sheep and just follow the flock.
Exactly.
We need to think on our own and to learn the other side of things and to not just panic because you hear this on the news. They want people to listen to the news.
Right. Now, if you think we're being really one-sided and aggressive, look at CBS News.
Exactly.
Back in 2009, under the Freedom of Information Act, they had an order for the CDC to give their records that showed how many people actually were tested for swine flu and how many people had it for every state in the country. And the CDC, that bad sport, refused to go ahead and disclose that information. So what happened is the CBC did its own study, and what they showed was that the number of people who actually had the flu or even influenza in the state of California was 2% of the 13,000 tests that were done had swine flu, and only a few other percentage points of people who had influenza of any kind. So it's way overstated. And the CDC is withholding the information because they don't want you to know that.
Well, it's also interesting to note that there are a lot more deaths from MRSA, the methicillin-resistant staph infections, from diabetes, and also from medical errors. But we don't hear about them in the same tone as we do about the flu.
Well, we should be focusing on what's fair. I mean, the flu shot is about money. That's the deduction I've come to. And I feel like I'm an authority on this because for every day for a year back in 2009, I tracked what the CDC and the FDA, what the World Health Organization, and other organizations was doing in terms of making proclamations about how that was unfolding. In fact, I wrote a paper called The Infection Deception that was published in a medical journal for doctors and patients called the Townsend Letter.
And you can find it on drsaputo.com.
If you go there to drsaputo.com and you put the infection deception, this paper will come up and it's referenced, and you'll see all the shenanigans that were pulled. I mean, even the stuff about this being a pandemic. What happened in March?
They changed the definition of pandemic conveniently.
Well, they changed it
to panic everybody and make it seem like more people were sick.
Well,
and it was sick with a cold.
Yeah, well, they changed the rules. A pandemic used to be something like what happened in 1918 when we had the Spanish flu and apparently millions of people died. In that setting, we had a very virulent virus that caused a lot of people to have disabilities and a lot of people died. That's a pandemic. How it was renamed in March before this fabrication of a pandemic started was that there were a few people in Mexico who turned out to have an infection with swine flu, which number, by the way, turned out to be about 7 that were proven, and that hardly makes an epidemic, even let alone a pandemic. But when they changed that rule to define a pandemic, they just said it just means that an illness of any kind, of any severity, could be in more than one country. So it's in countries spread all over the world. Well, like Vicki said, that's like tracking a cold. Now, that's not exactly what we want our CDC to do, nor do we want it to be a Category 6, which is the highest level of seriousness of a pandemic that makes it something where the president now starts making new changes in the law that can direct how medicine is practiced.
Anyway, if you're really interested in this topic, there's so much more that you can find on our website. We have other videos about it, and then the infection deception. It's a little bit long to read, but it really is thorough and really explains it.
Right. So don't fall for this baloney that you need your flu shot this year. There isn't any data that's solid that shows that it does anything. Now, I'll acknowledge that people are dying from the flu, as they are from other infections. but they're not near as many as there are from many other illnesses that we have, and it's not shown that the vaccine does any good. So why then panic and take the vaccine?
Well, so one of the things you can do is to live a healthy lifestyle, which includes getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, exercising, reducing your stress rates, washing your hands.
All those things are good.
All those things. But
And take a little bit of vitamin D, particularly in the wintertime, because you have to have vitamin D to have a strong immune system.
well, you'll notice when you hear anything in the news media, they don't talk about supplements. And when this happened in 2009, you can read more about it on our site. But when it happened in 2009, they
Even after
attacked
Andrew
all
Weil.
the, they
I mean, come
attacked
on.
all the complementary alternative medical
The supplement people.
suggestions. Yeah.
And there's a lot of data to support that there are a lot of supplements and herbs that do boost immunity. So if you live a healthy lifestyle and you take care of yourself, chances are you're not going to get the flu anyway. And if you decide to take the vaccine, just recognize that it's not proven that the vaccine works.